television in the 1970s was alive in a way that's hard to fully put into words. Every night of the week, living rooms across the country organized themselves around whatever was on. Some of those shows became legends, the ones everybody still talks about. But a lot of others just slipped away quietly, canceled too soon, shuffled into impossible time slots, or simply swept aside by whatever the networks thought audiences wanted next. And somehow, decades later, they're still gone, unstreamed, unrestored, barely mentioned. These are 10 forgotten sitcoms from the 1970s we want back.
Morning, Georgie.
Good morning, Princess.
Andy, would you get that bundle in the bedroom for me, please, dear?
Number 10, Arnie, CBS, 1970 to 1972. Let's start right at the very beginning of the decade, because Arnie deserves to be talked about, and it almost never is. The show premiered on CBS on September 19, 1970, and ran for 2 seasons, 48 episodes in total. Herschel Bernardi played Arnie Nouveau, a loyal, hard-working man who had spent years at the loading dock of a company called Continental Flange. He was blue-collar through and through, steady, unpretentious, the kind of man who knew every name on the floor and never asked for much of anything. Then one day, almost entirely by accident, he crossed paths with the company's owner, Hamilton Majors Jr. Arnie offered him some plain, honest advice, the way he'd offer it to anyone. Majors was so struck by it that he promoted Arnie overnight, straight into a management position. And that's where the story really began. Arnie hadn't changed. He still thought the same way, still talked the same way, still held onto his union card. He just suddenly found himself surrounded by people who had spent their entire working lives in boardrooms and executive offices. His boss, Majors, played with wonderful comic obliviousness by Roger Bowen, best known to film audiences as Henry Blake in Robert Altman's original MASH, was well-meaning, but completely baffled by how ordinary people lived. His secretary Felicia, played by Elaine Shore, somehow kept everything from falling apart, and his wife Lillian, played by Sue Annie Langdon, was warm and loving even as she watched her husband try to navigate a world neither of them had ever imagined he'd be in. There was something sharp and a little subversive buried inside this premise. Arnie never became someone else. He never pretended. He just tried to do the right thing from wherever he happened to be standing. That quiet, working-class dignity was the real heart of the show, and it came through in nearly every episode. In its first season, Arnie aired Saturday nights as the lead-in to the Mary Tyler Moore Show. It earned an Emmy nomination for Best Comedy Series. The cast was talented, the writing was solid, and the timing seemed right, and yet it never quite broke through. CBS moved it around the schedule in its second season. Charles Nelson Reilly joined as a new recurring character in the role of a television personality called Randy Robinson, and the format got tweaked in ways that didn't help. By March of 1972, the show was done. Herschel Bernardi was a Broadway heavyweight. He had replaced Zero Mostel in the lead of Fiddler on the Roof. He brought real theatrical depth to Arnie Nouveau, a warmth and specificity that made the character feel completely alive. If the show had aired a few years earlier, before All in the Family shifted what audiences expected from a sitcom, it might have found the long run it deserved. The timing, more than anything else, worked against it.
What's a monkey doing on the court?
He's our mascot, Dad. He'll bring us luck.
Yeah, the kind of luck Moby Dick.
Number 9, Me and the Chimp, CBS, 1972. Here's the argument for Me and the Chimp, and it's worth making directly. Television has spent 50 years trying to recreate the particular kind of domestic warmth that Gary Marshall was already reaching for in 1972, and it would be worth watching the original attempt. It ran on CBS from January 13th to April 27th, 1972, producing 13 episodes. Ted Bessel, who had spent 5 seasons playing opposite Marlo Thomas on That Girl, played Mike Reynolds, a mild-mannered dentist living in suburban California with his wife Liz, played by Anita Gillette, and their 2 kids, Scott and Kitty. The family ended up taking in a chimpanzee named Buttons, a washout from the space program, and the domestic chaos that followed became the engine of the series. The show was created by Gary Marshall and Thomas L. Miller. Happy Days was still 3 years away. Laverne and Shirley was still 4 years away. What Marshall was already doing here, building a show around the idea that a family's daily life is funnier and warmer and stranger than any plot you could impose on it, is the same instinct that drove everything he made afterward. The chimpanzee was the catalyst, not the point. Buttons, played by an animal owned by trainer Lou Schumacher and coached on set by Bob Rydell, couldn't be scripted. What it actually did on camera each week was unpredictable in ways that forced the human cast to react honestly, in real time, and that's where the show comes alive. Ted Bessel was one of the best reactors in 1970s television. That Girl had made that clear, and watching him respond to a chimpanzee operating entirely on its own agenda produces a quality of spontaneity that no amount of writing can fake. There's a reason the screwball comedies of the 1930s used physical chaos the same way. When something unscripted happens and a skilled performer catches it, the audience can feel the difference. What this show offers, for anyone curious enough to track down the few surviving episodes, is a glimpse of Gary Marshall learning how to make television, before the formula locked in, when the warmth was still raw and the chaos was real. That's worth something.
Look at all this beautiful furniture. Any of this stuff yours?
No.
Thank God.
Number 8. Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers, CBS, 1974 to 1975. This one may be the most heartbreaking entry on this list, because everything about it looked like a sure thing. The writers, the cast, the production company, the time slot, and then it was gone in 4 months. The show aired on CBS from September 14, 1974 to January 4th, 1975, producing just 15 episodes. It was created by James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, who were at that point the driving creative force behind The Mary Tyler Moore Show. MTM Enterprises produced it. The writing staff included Linda Bloodworth Thomason, Lowell Gans, and Mary Kay Place, among others. Episodes were directed by Jay Sandrich, Peter Boners, and other directors who were among the best in television comedy at the time. Paul Sand, the star, had won a Tony Award on Broadway and had received glowing reviews for guest appearances on both The Carol Burnett Show and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. CBS touted him as a significant new television presence. Sand played Robert Dreyfuss, a shy and perpetually unlucky romantic who had just won a seat as a double bass player with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. He was a gentle, self-deprecating man who fell in love easily and ended up saying the wrong thing at the exact wrong moment to the exact wrong person. His older brother Charlie, played by Michael Pataki, was his complete opposite: loud, athletic, aggressively protective. Charlie's wife Janice, played by Penny Marshall in one of her earliest regular television roles, mocked Robert's romantic failures with an affectionate and relentless cruelty that became one of the show's pleasures. Steve Landsberg played Fred, a fellow orchestra member with a strained relationship with his demanding German father, a dynamic that produced some of the series' funniest moments. Jack Gilford appeared as Robert and Charlie's father, Ben. CBS placed the show in what should have been perfect position. Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m., between All in the Family at 8 o'clock and The Mary Tyler Moore Show at 9 o'clock. In the fall of 1974, that was arguably the strongest time slot on American television. The network promoted it as the sleeper hit of the season. The premiere landed as the 14th most watched program of its week. By early October, the show was pulling a 36 share, but All in the Family that same week was pulling a 51 share. Network executives felt that Friends and Lovers wasn't delivering the lead-in audience that the Mary Tyler Moore Show needed. The viewership of the 9 o'clock hour was dipping on weeks when Friends and Lovers led into it, and CBS grew impatient. 2 weeks after the final episode aired in January 1975, the time slot was handed to the Jeffersons. Friends and Lovers, alongside the Texas Wheelers, became one of the first 2 MTM Enterprises productions ever to be canceled. Paul Sand never starred in another television series. The show has never been released in any format. It is not available to stream anywhere today.
You cheat! Why would I cheat, you abominable old...
Number 7. Hot L Baltimore, ABC 1975. By January of 1975, Norman Lear had built something that felt almost impossible to stop. All in the Family, Sanford and Son, Maude, Good Times, The Jeffersons, hit after hit, year after year. And then, in the very same week that The Jeffersons launched on CBS, Lear debuted a new show on ABC, and for the first time, the machine stalled. Hot L Baltimore aired from January 24th to April 18th, 1975, producing 13 episodes. It was adapted from Lanford Wilson's off-Broadway play, which had won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best American Play of 1972 to 73 and run for over 1,000 performances. Lear acquired the rights and adapted it into a half-hour sitcom, his first project for ABC after all of his prior successes on CBS. The title came from the Hotel Baltimore's decaying neon sign, where the letter E had burned out and nobody had replaced it. The hotel itself was a crumbling building facing urban demolition, and its residents were an extraordinary collection of people that network television had mostly pretended didn't exist. James Cromwell played Bill Lewis, the desk clerk. Richard Masur played Clifford Ainsley, the young, overwhelmed manager. Conchata Ferrell played April Green, a role she had originated in the stage production. Charlotte Ray played the eccentric Mrs. Bellotti, whose unseen son, Moose, accumulated legend with every passing episode without ever appearing on screen. Al Freeman Jr. played Charles Bingham, the most grounded and philosophically inclined member of the ensemble, and Lee Bergère and Henry Calvert played George and Gordon, one of the first openly gay couples depicted as an ordinary part of a recurring ensemble on American network television. Because of its content, including 2 central characters who were sex workers, one of them undocumented, ABC ran a content disclaimer before every episode. The ABC affiliate in Baltimore itself initially refused to broadcast the show. It finished the season 69th out of 84 programs, with an average 14.7 rating. Lear himself described it as his first failure, but critics recognized something real in it. The New York Times called the premiere one of the most interesting projects of the 1975 winter television season. And looking back, Hot L Baltimore was daring in ways most network television wasn't. It was a show about people that the medium had largely chosen to ignore, handled with humor and without condescension. It has nearly completely vanished. Very little footage survives.
He doesn't want to, okay?
No, it's not okay.
No, I'd rather play ping pong anyhow.
And what is it with you guys?
Number 6. On the Rocks, ABC 1975 to 1976. There is something quietly ironic about the fact that one of the sharpest prison comedies American television ever produced has barely been seen since it left the air in 1976. On the Rocks aired on ABC from September 11th, 1975 to May 17th, 1976, producing 24 episodes in a single season. It was based on the celebrated British sitcom Porridge and written by the same writers who created the original, Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennais. ABC promoted On the Rocks alongside Barney Miller, which aired in the preceding time slot under the shared tagline, Funny Cops and Funny Robbers. The show was set at the fictional A La Mesa Minimum Security Prison. The central figure was Hector Fuentes, played by Jose Perez, a streetwise, resourceful man who had clearly been through this system before and had learned exactly how it worked. His cellmates included Lester DeMott, played by Hal Williams, and naive first-timer Nikki Palak, played by Bobby Sandler, who gave audiences a way into the unfamiliar environment. On the other side of the bars, the bumbling guard, Mr. Sullivan, played by Tom Poston, the stern Mr. Gibson, played by Mel Stewart, and the pompous Warden Poindexter, played by Logan Ramsey. Rick Hurst played Cleaver, a large, good-natured Southern inmate who became one of the show's warmest recurring presences. Perez had said publicly that part of what drew him to the role was a desire to humanize the experience inside institutions. He had read about the 1971 Attica prison riot and felt that television hadn't adequately represented the people who actually lived in those circumstances. Walking that line inside a half-hour network comedy was no small task. The show did it more often than might be expected. What made On the Rocks land the way it did was the same thing that made Porridge work. It was never actually about prison. It was about dignity, about how people hold onto themselves in circumstances designed to strip everything away. Fuentes was clever, warm, and completely at home in a world built to break him down. That paradox was the show's entire beating heart. Only a small number of the 24 episodes have surfaced online in any form.
Complicated case.
Not that complicated.
He's badgering me now, isn't he?
No, he's not badgering you.
Number 5. The Tony Randall Show, ABC/CBS, 1976 to 1978. Tony Randall had spent 5 seasons as Felix Unger on The Odd Couple, winning an Emmy and building one of the most recognizable comic personas on American television. When that show ended in 1975, MTM Enterprises developed a new vehicle tailored specifically to his strengths. The result was The Tony Randall Show. The series premiered on ABC on September 23, 1976, ran 2 full seasons across 2 networks, and concluded on CBS on March 25, 1978, 44 episodes in total. Created by Tom Patchett and Jay Tarsis, veterans of The Bob Newhart Show, with the second season produced by Gary David Goldberg and Hugh Wilson. Randall played Judge Walter Franklin, a widowed Philadelphia judge raising his 2 children alone with the unreliable assistance of his British housekeeper, Mrs. McClellan, played by Rachel Roberts. At the courthouse, his life was organized and complicated by his acerbic secretary, Miss Janet Rubner, played with magnificent crispness by Alan Ann McClary, and his bumbling court reporter, Jack Terwilliger, played by Barney Martin. Diana Muldaur appeared regularly as Walter's love interest, Judge Eleanor Hooper. Hans Conried joined in the second season as Walter's irascible father, Wyatt, and near the end of the run, a very young Michael Keaton appeared in 2 episodes as one of Walter's night school law students, a footnote that gets more interesting every year. The writing throughout was intelligent and character-driven, much closer in spirit to the best CBS comedies of the early 1970s than to what ABC was broadcasting in 1976. Grant Tinker believed in it enough to move it to CBS for a second season. CBS gave it a full pickup, but the audience had already moved on. The show has never been released on home video. Some episodes are accessible through the Internet Archive, but the complete series remains hard to find. Number 4, Carter Country, ABC 1977 to 1979. Not every show from this era that faded away deserved to. Carter Country is about as clear an example of that as you'll find. The series aired on ABC from September 15, 1977 to August 23, 1979, running 2 full seasons and 44 episodes. It was set in the fictional small town of Clinton Corners, Georgia, a name chosen with an obvious nod to Plains, Georgia, the hometown of President Jimmy Carter, who had been elected the previous year and whose name gave the show its title. Victor French, whom many viewers knew as Mr. Edwards from Little House on the Prairie, played Chief Roy Moby, the affable and frequently baffled head of the local police department. Keen Holiday played Sergeant Curtis Baker, a college-educated officer originally from New York City, who arrived in Clinton Corners and found himself navigating a small southern town with very complicated feelings about his presence. Richard Paul played Mayor Teddy Burnside with a magnificent sense of self-importance. Vernie Watson played Lucille, Curtis's love interest. Geach Kook played Deputy Harley Puckett, warm, loyal, and not especially sharp. Harvey Vernon played Deputy Jasper DeWitt Jr., a bigoted officer who presented one of the show's more interesting challenges. Several episodes hinted strongly that Jasper's racism was partly performance, and that he had embedded himself in local extremist groups to monitor their activities from inside. A young Melanie Griffith appeared in 2 episodes during the run. Kyle Richards appeared in several episodes of the second season in a recurring role. When the New York Times reviewed the premiere in September 1977, the critic called it Barney Miller down home. Like Barney Miller, the show used a police department as a gathering place for a broader community, a space where different kinds of people were thrown together and forced to work out their contradictions and affections in close quarters. The chemistry between French and Holiday was genuine. The show's willingness to put race and region at the center of its story, without turning either man into a cartoon, gave it real substance that most network comedies of the era weren't willing to attempt. It ran for 2 years. It has never been formally released. It cannot be found streaming anywhere today, and that is worth being annoyed about.
We're on my left. 4410 would be...
Number 3, Holmes and Yo-Yo, ABC 1976. The case for Holmes and Yo-Yo isn't that it was a great show. The case is that it was attempting something that television comedy has been trying to crack ever since, and it deserved more than 11 episodes to find out whether it could work. The series aired on ABC from September the 25th to December 11th, 1976, with 2 remaining episodes broadcast the following August. 13 episodes in total. Richard B. Schull played Detective Alexander Holmes, a well-meaning but catastrophically accident-prone officer whose pattern of injuring partners had become a department-wide crisis. The department's solution? Assign him Gregory Yo-Yo Yoyanovich, a secret android prototype built for police work, played by John Schuck, who had previously worked with executive producer Leonard Stern on Macmillan and Wife on NBC. Holmes figured out almost immediately that his new partner was not human. His captain, played by Bruce Kirby, had no idea. A fellow officer named Maxine Moon, played by Andrea Howard, developed genuine romantic feelings for Yo-Yo, complicated by the fact that Yo-Yo was not, as the show reminded viewers weekly, programmed for love. According to the show's own internal logic, Yo-Yo weighed 425 pounds, had a photographic memory, could produce color prints through a camera in his nose, could absorb explosives directly into his machinery, and occasionally drifted onto a Swedish radio station when his circuit slipped. When systems overloaded, he would repeat the phrase, "Bunko Squad," until somebody reset him. Now, the reason this deserves to be on this list. The comedy duo built around a human straight man and a partner who processes the world by different rules entirely is one of the oldest and most durable structures in all of comedy. The reason Get Smart worked, the reason shows like this keep getting attempted, is that the formula has enormous room inside it when writers find the right tone. Holmes and Yo-Yo was produced by Leonard Stern, who built Get Smart, and directed in several episodes by John Astin, Gomez Adams himself, who understood exactly what register the material needed. The bones were there. The premise had range. What it didn't have was time. 11 episodes is not enough for any comic duo to settle into each other, develop their rhythms, and start finding the moments that no writer could predict on the page. RoboCop, a darker, harder-edged version of nearly the same idea, became a film franchise a decade later. Holmes and Yo-Yo was canceled before it could even find out what it was.
Tony, you're the greatest. It's okay. Hey, it's okay. We're brothers. It's all right. It's okay. We're brothers. Don't ever.
Number 2, Makin It, ABC 1979. Timing can be everything in television, and the timing of Makin It was almost perfectly wrong. The show aired on ABC from February 1st to March 23rd, 1979, just 9 episodes. It was created by Mark Rothman, Lowell Gans, and Gary Marshall, with Robert Stigwood, the man who produced Saturday Night Fever and managed the Bee Gees, involved in its development. David Naughton played Billy Minucci, a young man from Passaic, New Jersey, who spent his days behind the counter at an ice cream parlor called Tasty Queen, and his nights on the dance floor of a local disco called the Inferno. Ellen Travolta, John Travolta's sister, who had appeared in Saturday Night Fever, played his mother Dorothy. Greg Antonacci played his older brother Tony, a confident and effortless dancer who had always cast a long shadow. Denise Miller played his younger sister Tina. Lou Antonio played their bumbling, affectionate father, Joseph. The show wore its Saturday Night Fever inspiration openly. What it had going for, it was a compelling lead. Naughton was warm and physically expressive, and a real undercurrent of family warmth beneath the disco surface. Gary Marshall's instinct for that kind of sweetness was already evident. Take away the dance floor, and there was a solid coming-of-age story underneath the flashing lights. But disco was already dying by early 1979. The backlash was well underway, and by July of that year, the Disco Demolition Night event at Comiskey Park in Chicago would turn cultural rejection into something louder and more dramatic. The show was already canceled months before that moment arrived. The theme song, written by Freddie Perrin and Dino Fakaris, the songwriters behind I Will Survive and More Than a Woman, and produced by Stigwood, was performed by Naughton himself. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1979, 4 months after the cancellation. It appeared in the Bill Murray film Meatballs. The song stayed on the charts longer than the show stayed on the air, which tells you something about the gap between what audiences actually felt about Makin It and what the ratings suggested. The show had real heart. It arrived at exactly the wrong moment, celebrating something the country had already decided it was finished with. That's not a creative failure, that's just bad luck. Only 1 episode has surfaced in full online.
Really? And I happen to know that on that particular night he was at home in bed.
Number 1, The Betty White Show, CBS 1977 to 1978. By 1977, Betty White was already television royalty. She had been a fixture of the medium since its earliest days, and her recent work as the cheerfully backstabbing Sue Ann Nivens on The Mary Tyler Moore Show had earned her 2 Emmy Awards and a wave of new appreciation from audiences. MTM Enterprises, the company that produced The Mary Tyler Moore Show, developed a new series built around her. The Betty White Show aired on CBS from September 12, 1977 to January 9, 1978. 14 episodes across a single season. Created by Ed Weinberger and Stan Daniels, 2 of the principal writers from The Mary Tyler Moore Show, with David Lloyd contributing scripts throughout. The pilot was directed by Bill Persky. White played Joyce Whitman, a middle-aged actress who had just landed the lead role on a fictional cop drama called Undercover Woman, a clear satire of the NBC series Police Woman, which was still running at the time. Joyce was thrilled to have the job, and then discovered that the director of the production was her ex-husband, John Elliott, played by John Hillerman, who was between his run on Ellery Queen and his celebrated years on Magnum P.I. Joyce referred to him as Old Pickle Puss. He returned the sentiment with considerable creativity. Georgia Engel, who had played Georgette on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and who had a real off-screen friendship with White spanning many years, played Mitzi Maloney, Joyce's naive, endlessly good-hearted best friend and roommate. Karen Kay played Tracy Garrett, the young, conventionally beautiful co-star whom the network was already positioning to overshadow Joyce. Barney Phillips played veteran supporting actor Fletcher Huff. Charles Cyphers played Hugo, Joyce's oversized male stunt double. Alex Henteloff played Doug Porterfield, the production's perpetually cost-conscious network liaison. The premise was sharp. White and Hillerman had terrific comic chemistry, the abrasive dynamic of 2 people who ended their marriage without ever fully letting go of each other. The show, within a show format, gave the writers room to satirize how television actually worked. There were real laughs in it. CBS scheduled it directly opposite Monday Night Football on ABC and the NBC Monday Movie, arguably the 2 most durable audience magnets on the schedule at that time. Viewership never developed, and the show was canceled before it could find its stride. Nick at Night and TV Land broadcast reruns briefly in the 1990s, and a handful of episodes can be found online today. But for most viewers, this chapter of Betty White's long and extraordinary career has been almost completely lost. The 1970s gave American television some of its most adventurous and daring comedy, but for every show that survived long enough to become part of the lasting conversation, All in the Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Barney Miller, there were a dozen others that barely lasted a season, canceled before they could build an audience, buried in impossible time slots, caught in the crossfire of network strategy shifts and cultural changes they had no control over. Arnie never came back. Paul Sand and Friends and Lovers never came back. Hot L Baltimore, On the Rocks, Carter Country, The Tony Randall Show, The Betty White Show, almost none of these have ever been formally released for a general audience to see again. They exist in scattered clips, in old television guides, and in the memories of people who happened to be sitting in front of the right channel on the right evening 50 years ago. That is a genuine loss, and it's worth saying so. If you grew up watching any of these shows, or if this sent you down a rabbit hole of 1970s television you hadn't known existed before today, we'd really love to hear about it in the comments. These conversations are how shows like these stay alive in any form at all. And if you'd like to see more, forgotten television, overlooked history, the shows that slipped through the cracks of an extraordinary era, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more people find the channel, and it means we can keep doing exactly this kind of work. Thanks for watching.